Mark, you've been down at the White House for the royal visit. How's that going?
I have. It seems to be going very well, James. I was there on the South Lawn watching as the King and the Queen, their BMW German car, interesting, rolled up
Or not?
and yeah, rolled up, and there was the President and the First Lady waiting at the South Portico. There were kisses, there were handshakes, and I have to say, I thought the President looked very excited indeed.
Yeah, the Americans like the royals, don't they? But not enough to, well, put up the proper flag. Is that right?
Yeah, that was. Well, there've been a few a few hiccups, shall we say, that we couldn't help but notice. First was that the flags have been put up on various streets around the White House. There's the Stars and Stripes. I think it's the flag of Washington D.C. But then the Union flag. Clearly, the memo went out. We need the Union flag to be put up, and somebody put up the Australian flag.
And
Not great, not great. It was quickly
no.
taken down. The White House blamed the DC municipality, who blamed someone else. Anyway, it was short-lived, but not short enough for someone to snap a photo.
Yeah, I couldn't help noticing that on the road outside the White House, they'd run out of asphalt to fix the potholes. The King and Queen, they travelled 3,000 miles to escape the potholes of Blighty, and it's kind of home from home.
I'm Mark Stone, and I am in my home studio in my basement in Washington, D.C. after another very, very long day.
Yeah, and I'm James Matthews, and I'm in my basement just down the road.
Yeah, we have got a lot to get through. The royal visit, of course. We're going to reflect more on that extraordinary weekend, the shooting at the Washington Hilton, because the man accused of it has been in court. James, you've been there.
Yeah, court number 7, where Cole Thomas Allen appeared, last seen pinned to the floor under arrest at the Washington Correspondents' Dinner. He's accused of attempting to assassinate the president.
Yes, and on that, I have been at the briefing of Caroline Levitt, gave another briefing at the White House today, where there were many questions about the security of the president, the first lady, and the cabinet after that shooting. So a lot to get into.
Yeah, the King and Queen, they've got a full agenda in the United States, but it won't include a meeting with survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. They asked, but the palace said no. We'll look at why.
So, James, let's begin with the suspected gunman from the shooting at the White House Correspondents' Association dinner on Saturday night. We were both there along with our colleagues as well. He has appeared in court.
He has, yeah. Court number 7 at the building just down the road from our bureau, actually about, 3/4 of a mile from the White House. Cole Thomas Allen. He was led in to the court. He'd been in this caged area behind the court. You could see through the door. And interestingly, at one point, his court-appointed lawyers, they turned up carrying a cardboard bag, lifted a pair of shoes from that bag. And at one point before it started, they were passed through to these cages. You could see the cold steel of captivity, you know. So our man Julie appeared. He's very tall. He was surrounded by 4 U.S. Marshals, kind of looked like judo fighters between contests. You know, he wasn't handcuffed. Led to his seat, and that's where he sat. He was dressed in a blue prison jumpsuit, and he looked tired. I thought, you know, he's got short hair, goatee beard, didn't look shaven to me. And he glanced around a packed public gallery, didn't rest his gaze on anybody in particular. Was more interested, I think, in the paperwork that listed the charges that he faces. And, you know, he was duly attentive, polite to the judge, raised his right hand. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. Lasted about 10, 15 minutes.
Fascinating. 31 years old, and we got details of the charges, charged with the attempted assassination of the President of the United States, Donald Trump. He was told by the judge that could involve a maximum sentence of life in jail and I thought this was quite intriguing, a fine of up to $250,000. Kind of seems slightly odd, quaint to have a for a fine to be part of the punishment for trying to murder the president. But there we go. 2 other counts as well: transporting a firearm and ammunition with intent to commit a felony, and discharging a firearm during a crime of violence.
Yeah, when he was told that potential maximum sentence, Mark, he nodded, just a kind of brief, polite nod to the judge. An affidavit has been unsealed. That gives details of what happened during that attack, Mark. While we were in the ballroom,
Mm.
it was a floor above, wasn't it? This affidavit, it gives more detail of what actually was going on. An FBI agent has said that Alan ran through a magnetometer. As a reminder, that's these kind of airport style arches. He ran through that with a shotgun and a pistol. Agents, they heard a gunshot. One of them was then shot in the chest, but saved by a bulletproof vest. It's not clear if it was the suspect who fired that shot.
Mm.
We heard in a news conference from Todd Blanche, didn't we, acting Attorney General? He said the agent who was injured then fired his gun at Alan. There were 5 shots. Alan fell to the ground and then he was arrested. But interestingly, he was not shot. Blanche, he said he couldn't be 100% sure that Alan fired his weapon, but they think he did because there was a spent cartridge inside the shotgun.
Yeah, and fascinating new detail over the course of the day. The reasons alleged for why Alan may have made this attempt.
Yeah, that's to be established in full, but we do know he sent an email to his family shortly before the attack, and officials are saying that this displayed anti-Trump sentiment, and he describes his targets as administration officials, not guests or hotel employees. And Alan, in this document, he apologizes to family and friends. He wrote that these targets from the Trump administration were prioritized from highest ranking to lowest, he wrote. Said he was surprised to have been able to check into the hotel the day before event with the weapons that he had.
Absolutely extraordinary. And we know too that he had traveled from California all the way to Washington, D.C. by train, presumably so that he could take the weapons with him. If he tried to go on an aeroplane, he would have been found out with those weapons. So he took a train all the way from California up to Chicago, and then changed train, took another train from Chicago to Washington, D.C. These are vast, vast distances. It took him a couple of days to make that journey by train. But as you and I were commenting, James, when was it? The last time we did the podcast at the weekend after the shooting. It's eerie and chilling to think that he was in the hotel when we were all there, in the hotel with those weapons. And then while we were beginning our meal, he emerged from his room, alleged, went downstairs and tried to run through those metal detectors. That is all the detail that we now have alleged by the prosecution for what he is said to have done.
Yeah, and I do keep hearing, Mark, the establishment patting themselves on the back, saying that security did its job, and of course, it did do its job. But what if he didn't have a shotgun and a pistol? What if he had a bomb? This guy who checked into a multi-story hotel, set the bomb off, and what would the consequences then have been?
That's a really
for
good
everybody,
point.
Including us, 2 floors below ground level. So.
That is a chilling point that I hadn't thought of. I mean, we all remember, in a British historic scenario, we remember Brighton, don't we?
Yeah, this was the day I was meant to die, said Maggie Thatcher. Well, a success on the night, clearly in terms of capturing this individual, but to some extent, at least, we got lucky.
And of course, that is why the White House has announced that Susie Wiles, who's the chief of staff for President Trump, will carry out, has called a meeting, I should say, for at some point this week, a meeting that will involve the director of the Secret Service, who I saw walking into the White House this morning, and also senior officials from the Department of Homeland Security, all of them are going to spend some time, I think, reflecting on the weekend and working out what more they could have done and what more needs to be done in the future.
There's no doubt that on Saturday we were well protected, but it's also true to say that we were lucky.
Yeah, so Cole Thomas Allen has been temporarily held in custody. He did not enter a plea in this initial hearing. A detention hearing has been set for Thursday, and a preliminary hearing has been scheduled as well for the 11th of May, and we'll keep you across all of that.
Now, Mark, last week Caroline Levitt signed off from briefing the press at the White House. She's due to give birth any day, I think, but she was back today giving a briefing, and you were there, yeah?
Yeah, she was back because she felt she needed to be back given the events of the weekend. Of course, she was in the Washington Hilton as well, sitting right next to the president on the top table when all of this unfolded. Heavily pregnant and due to sign off, but back today with another briefing, a shorter one. It was a little over half an hour, I think. She made a few statements at the top. She took a few questions, sadly not mine. Next time, maybe. I was keen to ask her about the security for the king and the queen. Their visit, we'll come on to that in a moment. Oddly, there was no, or maybe not odd, maybe it's only us that are obsessed with the royals, but there were no questions about the king and the queen. She said at the top of the news conference that they were arriving and that Melania, the first lady, was leading on all of the work that has gone into the state visit to make it as special as President Trump can hope it would be. But the most of the briefing was taken up, James, with a focus on the weekend, a focus on security, and some very pointed criticism from Caroline Levitt of the left across America following the events of Saturday night. It's the view of the White House that it is the left that is raising the rhetoric, raising the temperature across the country, and their criticism of President Trump and his policies, their tone, is the reason why crazies, as they put it, are doing what they did on Saturday night.
This hateful and constant and violent rhetoric directed at President Trump day after day after day for 11 years has helped legitimize this violence and bring us to this dark moment. Those who constantly falsely label and slander the president as a fascist, as a threat to democracy, and compare him to Hitler to score political points are fueling this kind of violence.
Yeah, Mark, on Caroline Levitt, I see Oz Perlman, the mentalist or magician who was performing on Saturday night. And actually, we've seen the picture of him leaning over Donald Trump's shoulder, looking at Levitt. At that time, he's showing her a piece of paper, isn't he? When the shooting happens, he was predicting the name of her baby girl, interestingly enough. But to get back to your point about, rhetoric, my mind is cast back to Saturday night when the president, he called for Americans to recommit with their hearts to resolving their differences peacefully. Now, we've clearly, and not for the first time, fallen off that wagon. The White House,
we said we might, didn't we? Do you remember?
Yes.
We said that it wouldn't take him long. And what has it been, a day?
Yeah. Who needs a mentalist to tell us that? But anyway, the White House, they were calling Democrats a cult of hatred today. Donald Trump himself, look at his past record talking about Liz Cheney. Let's put her with a rifle, standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her. Said that I think we would have riots, said that in 2016, talking about what would happen if he wasn't nominated for the Republicans. In Charlottesville, remember the white supremacist rally? There were very fine people on both sides. So, we've been here before with Donald Trump. The rhetoric of political violence, the moments that break out calling for peace, and then a descent back into type.
Yeah, and that was to be my question, which is a bit frustrating. I wanted to know from Caroline Levitt whether he, the president, recognised that it is incumbent on him as well to dial down the rhetoric and to reduce the temperature. And it's not just a challenge for the left, which it undoubtedly is, but also for the right and for those within his own circles, including himself. Unfortunately, she didn't come to me, so I didn't ask that question. But certainly the sense was on his initial statement that he did recognize that he had some responsibility to bear himself for his own language. But it didn't sound like that was quite the case today through his spokesperson.
Caroline Levitt raised the issue of Jimmy Kimmel, Mark, didn't she? Took the opportunity to point the finger at somebody the administration think is guilty of what they call violent and hateful rhetoric. Kimmel, of course, he's the ABC host.
Yeah, it followed a post on X, first thing, from First Lady Melania Trump, who said it was time for ABC to take a stand against the comedian who had long been critical of Donald Trump and his policies. Yeah, her tweet read, "Kimmel's hateful and violent rhetoric is intended to divide our country. His monologue about my family isn't comedy. His words are corrosive and deepens the political sickness within America. People like Kimmel shouldn't have the opportunity to enter our homes each evening to spread hate."
She went on, "A coward. Kimmel hides behind ABC because he knows the network will keep running cover to protect him. Enough is enough. It's time for ABC to take a stand. How many times will ABC's leadership enable Kimmel's atrocious behavior at the expense of our community?"
Yeah, really strong language there from the First Lady, from her X account. It's a reference to a Kimmel skit broadcast on Thursday, well before the Saturday attack on the White House Correspondents' Dinner. In it, he said Melania Trump was a, quote, expectant widow in a speech about Trump's family's alleged connections to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, I do wonder, Mark. It's a joke clearly near the knuckle, and I suppose many people will find it too much. But I've seen a lot of whataboutery today. What about some of the things Donald Trump has said or posted in the past? Remember when Robert Mueller died, former FBI chief, he posted, good. I'm glad he's dead.
Yeah.
So I think if we're sacking people for failing the taste and decency test, then for Melania, it's maybe time to call in the removal vans. Not the first time she's targeted Jimmy Kimmel, of course.
No, and ABC pulled him off air at one point, didn't they? It was a few months ago. But he was back. And we'll see how ABC deals with this over the days ahead. So, James, the King and Queen, they are in town.
Yeah, good times, Mark. And cucumber sandwiches, is that right?
Well, yeah, except I didn't get any. I was very disappointed. I had to go. I was very grateful to get an invitation to the garden party at His Majesty's Ambassador's residence. I have not been to a garden party before, and it was in many ways just as I expected, because there were cucumber sandwiches, there was Pimm's, there was champagne, there was Earl Grey tea, courtesy of Fortnum and Mason, I think. So it was a quintessentially British afternoon. I think when I say champagne, I'm wrong, because it wasn't champagne, it was English sparkling wine. Of course it was, but it was quintessentially British. But I didn't get a cucumber sandwich.
Well, that intrigues me, because you did a very good piece over the weekend and spoke to the chef, yeah?
I did, yeah.
And remind me how many cucumber sandwiches he has to make?
Yes, James, 2,500 cucumber sandwiches, but not one for me. But I'll tell you why, though, because I arrived late, because I'd been at the White House all day. We'll talk about that in a moment. But by the time I arrived, the King and Queen were already about to arrive, and so they'd stopped serving the food.
2,500 cucumber sandwiches. I'm just worried about the bill for the Ferrero Rocher. But, Mark, that's all clearly good fun. Serious edge to this, though, yeah, an important trip.
Yeah, a really important trip, and full of jeopardy as well. It was interesting on the royal family's Twitter X account, when they announced the arrival of their majesties. They were, I felt, kind of at pains to point out that they were there at the request of the government. Let me try and find the post. Yeah, here it is. It says the King and Queen have arrived in Washington, D.C. to begin a 4-day state visit to the USA on the advice of His Majesty's government and at the invitation of the President of the United States. So a reminder there that the King travels when the government asks him to, and this is going to be soft power through and through, I think.
Yeah, it's a 4-day trip, Mark. 2 days in Washington, 1 day in New York, one day in Virginia, yeah?
Yes, and I think that last bit, the Virginia bit, which is the most public-facing bit of the trip, where they are due to meet real people rather than people in bubbles, is, I think, given what happened at the weekend, that's the bit that's going to require maybe not a rethink, but certainly a little bit more focus on the security aspect of it. But as things stand, there has been no big change to their schedule at all. They want things to go to plan, and it, apart from the roadworks and the flag mishap that we discussed, it does appear to be going very, very well so far. After they touched down at Joint Base Andrews, they made their way to the White House, where I was on the South Lawn for the arrival, and they had tea with the president and the first lady, and then they went to look at some beehives, James.
Actual beehives.
Actual beehives.
Rock and roll.
Yeah. They spent some time outside. I imagine it was right up the King Street. They went to the kitchen garden of the White House, which apparently is something Melania is particularly keen on, and spent some time at the White House. So they were a little late for the garden party at the embassy.
Yeah, it's interesting the US interest in this visit. I mean, obviously the UK press are all over it. You were saying that Caroline Levitt was not asked about the King and Queen. I'm interested in that at the White House. That tells us something, perhaps. I saw CNN. They were live anchoring their evening show at the British Embassy, so they were paying due attention. An NBC reporter, you were telling me, got the grammar wrong, yeah? Unfamiliar with the way we do things.
Unfamiliar with the concept of a garden party. He was broadcasting outside the embassy, and he was talking about the gardening party, which I imagine would be something completely different from a garden party. Have you ever been to a garden party, James?
I've been trying to rack my brain. I think I've covered garden parties, but people who go tell me, listen, see if you get invited. It's a massive crowd. You queue up endlessly, and if you're lucky, you get to meet the Queen. So they get mixed reviews.
So let me paint the picture. So it takes place in the grounds of the Lutyens mansion, the Edwin Lutyens mansion, that is the ambassador's residence. It's an impressive building. It's said to be the best embassy or the best residence in Washington D.C. It's huge, and the day was perfect. Blue skies, not a cloud in the sky. All the guests, 600 of them, the great and the good from Washington, D.C., the sort of the power people, as well as people who were invited from different communities around the country. But I have to say, much of it was very spontaneous, and they moved down this line. They chatted to different people, whether it be, journalists like me who were invited, or I didn't get a chance to speak to either of them, or senators, Congress people. There were people from the cabinet there as well. I spotted Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick. They were both there. Ted Cruz, that fiery senator from Texas, he was there. I spotted him getting a word with the Queen, and I asked him afterwards what he'd said to her, and he said he'd welcomed her across the pond and that he'd introduced her to his daughter.
I incidentally, speaking of the embassy, made my piece on Saturday night. That was one of the things to come out of the correspondence dinner. In the street, I bumped into, and keen listeners will remember, the guy at the embassy who said the Peter Mandelson doorstep was an old story and we shouldn't.
Oh, yeah.
Keen on us running it. Anyway, we shook hands, and he leaned in and he said, "Told you that was an old story." I said, "You rascal. I'm upgrading you to a scallywag." So anyway, we're all pals now. A whole range of issues, difficult issues that are threaded through this trip, of course, not least the relationship between Trump and Starmer, the man he calls a loser, and, he's no Churchill, all of that, a difficult political backdrop to all of this. And it's a challenge for the King and Queen, isn't it, to try and smooth that over. I know they're not keen on the phrase special relationship in the British embassy, but I think Britain at large very much is. And I I mean, this is not far short of a mission to try and preserve that, isn't it?
I think it is. I think they think the phrase, well, when things are going very well, they love the phrase special relationship. When things are not going so well, they don't like it. They find it a bit cringy. They find it a bit cliched, almost a bit needy as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, at the moment, they don't like that phrase. Although I've noticed that it has been used by the Americans quite a lot over the past couple of days. So I think underneath, when the Americans invoke the phrase, then it gives the British political establishment a little sort of tickle, because they think, oh, maybe we are still special.
The king came up in conversations I had actually at the weekend. I was on the National Mall, and survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, they were there to remember Virginia Giuffre. She was the woman who accused the former Prince Andrew. There is that infamous photo of the two of them in each other's company. She accused him of sexually assaulting her aged 17 after she'd been trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew denied it, but he did settle a civil law claim that she brought. Ro Khanna is the congressman he's the guy who co-authored the Epstein Files Transparency Act to get the files published. He asked Buckingham Palace for a private meeting to take place between survivors and the royals, but the palace has declined. Now, I spoke to Virginia's brother and his wife, Skye and Amanda Roberts. They told me that to them, that was a disappointment.
This is a missed opportunity to him because we are 5 minutes away from you. I will be lobbying in the Capitol Hill, in the Capitol building, on that same day that you'll be arriving. And it's a missed opportunity because even if it's not to go into depths, it means something to look into a survivor's eyes and say, I promise to give you a fair and thorough investigation in this. And that does not matter if it's my brother or if it's other perpetrators out there. I, the King of England, stand with survivors.
Buckingham Palace, Mark, it says the King and Queen won't be able to meet the survivors in case anything arises from such a meeting that would prejudice ongoing police investigations in the UK and any resulting legal action.
Just on that, James, it's interesting. I was at a briefing with British officials a couple of days ago as they prepared for this visit, and one of the issues they were pushed on was precisely that. Why would the King and Queen be unable to meet survivors, and why would it potentially prejudice ongoing investigations? And the officials we were speaking to couldn't really give a particularly good answer for that. They sort of just deferred to government lawyers whose advice had been this wouldn't be a good idea. But part of it, I think, is that all legal cases in the UK are always the Crown against the defendant, and so because of that kind of quirk of the British system, the Crown, the King, cannot say anything about an ongoing or a potential case. That seems to be what the British government and the royal family is hiding behind. But it's certainly still a very prickly issue. It's one of the elephants in the room in this visit. There are a few of them. That's certainly one.
I have to say that sounds a stretch to me, Mark. If they are saying that the King is essentially prosecutor in chief, I'm not sure I buy that. And I tell you, I actually, in an email to the palace over the weekend when I was doing the story, I asked, what is the specific legal difficulty with such a meeting taking place? And if there is a specific difficulty, then tell us.
What did they say?
Why wouldn't you tell us? Well, they didn't answer it specifically. They sent me a statement which looked familiar to me. It was a kind of pat statement, saying that what I just said, that they don't want to jeopardize ongoing police investigations, didn't want to impact on legal action, made the point that the King has spoken in the past of his deepest concern at events involving his brother and that he supports an investigation. But listen to, I'm no lawyer, neither are you. A woman by the name of Sigrid McCauley is. She's the US attorney who has represented Epstein survivors, including Virginia Giuffre. Listen to her.
I was really disappointed to hear that. I certainly, as a lawyer, I appreciate that there can be legal ramifications from certain actions, but there's no legal ramification to just sit and listen. And I think he could have given an audience to those survivors and just explained that he wasn't able to engage with them, but he would love to hear what they have to share with him. That, to me, would be what a respectful, strong leader would do.
No, Mark, I think the King and Queen, clearly, they can't meet everybody who wants their time. But I do wonder about the wisdom of not meeting survivors. I wonder about the compassion. I do see the awkwardness. I mean, legal issues aside, which I think have to be questionable.
Yeah.
I see the awkwardness with regard to Andrew and Trump, both of whom deny involvement in or knowledge of Epstein's criminal activity. But, you know, the King and Queen, they've only been here a couple of hours as we record. They've met already campaigners against domestic abuse on the trip. But the Epstein affair is unique. And I do think to engage with the survivors at the heart of one of the biggest child trafficking stories, if not the biggest of our time, would be a statement that would resonate,
I think you're
worldwide, and it would serve them well. This is a royal family that wants to sustain a relevance, a connection to the public and public affairs. And there's a danger here that they are seen to put risk management ahead of compassion in all of this.
And it wouldn't need to be a public meeting necessarily. They could organize a private meeting. There could be, a photograph or whatever. There are ways of managing this. There are ways of managing the moment. But they chose not to. The legal stuff they have presented as the reason why they won't do this, it certainly seems to me to raise a few more questions.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is as well, Donald Trump is a man who tries to dismiss the Epstein affair at every turn. And listen, he would be uncomfortable with a meeting between the royals and survivors, but that's no reason not to do it. Indeed, I think if you don't have a meeting because it would cause him problems, then to a degree, you're aligning yourself with the Trump administration's handling of the affair. And that is a percentage complicity, I think. And that offends anybody who believes there's more to the Epstein affair than the Trump administration is telling us. And there are plenty of people who believe that.
Speaking of Epstein, of course, Peter Mandelson had his connections with Jeffrey Epstein. And I was thinking about that today as I watched the new ambassador guiding the King and the Queen around his garden, the garden of the residence. In another world, it would have been Peter Mandelson doing that job. He would have been the ambassador, and he would have been the person showing the King and Queen around. But you
couldn't make it up, could you?
I know a lot has happened since then. Because the King and Queen were there, they were the principals. They were the most important people. Everyone else was a mere mortal, and so it was the case that no matter who you are, whether you were Wolf Blitzer of CNN, whether you were Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, or Muriel Bowser, the mayor of DC, or indeed Lindsey Graham, one of the most powerful, influential senators, all of them were kind of on a level with everyone who was there and were being shouted at by the British military officials to get back. You need to take 2 or 3 steps back, please. It was very funny.
Commoners.
Yeah, we were all, everyone was a commoner. Except 2 people. But anyway, a big, big day ahead. Lots to look out for tomorrow. The King will address Congress, both houses of Congress. Only the second time this has happened. It was his mother, Queen Elizabeth, who addressed Congress for the first time, I think 1991. We know a few things about this. We know that his address was written by the UK government to support their strategic priorities. In fact, I was speaking to a source today who was involved in the speech and said it's been through so many different drafts, different people involved in the drafting of both speeches, the one he will make to Congress, but also the speech slightly shorter that he will make at the state dinner, which is the other big thing that is happening over the course of the day ahead. A state dinner in the White House, in the East Room of the White House, I believe.
Yeah, that Congress speech has been tweaked after the events of Saturday. The King will address, we're told, the shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The main theme of the Congress speech will be that despite these challenging times, and I'm quoting the palace here, he'll say the US and UK can defend and reaffirm their long-standing shared democratic values to create security and prosperity for themselves and the world. The King is expected to say the story of the US and UK over the last 250 years as one of reconciliation and renewal. And it's a story of one of the greatest alliances in human history.
But I think the most visual part of the day will be the morning, Washington time, at the White House. We heard the preparations over the course of the past day, the sound checks that were taking place. I think it's going to be a real spectacle. So tune in to Sky News. Alistair Bruce, our events commentator, is going to be taking us through it all. A pass in review of 300 US service members. That is what the King will do. That is an event the White House is calling an historic first for state visits. There will be thousands of guests in the grounds of the White House, a military arrival ceremony, a 21-gun cannon salute, and the inspection of troops, as I say. So it's going to be quite the spectacle indeed.
Yeah, look forward to all of that. Many thanks to you for listening and for watching. Do join us tomorrow and get in touch with us. It's the usual address, Trump100 at sky.uk.
Bye-bye.
All the best.